Oh, my friends, it is such a beautiful, beautiful spring day here. Just look at that. Look at the blues in the sky. That is just unbelievable. And all the little trees, big trees, are getting leaves. Just so stunning. And there's no wind, so I'm thinking this might be a good time for us to have a little chat about deconditioning. So, deconditioning is a word that people use a lot. Deconditioning and unmasking. They both hold the same core concept, and that's sort of coming back to what Martha Beck calls your essential self. So we're all born into this world with a certain set of conditioning already, right? We get that initial conditioning through genetics, through epigenetics, through our inheritance, through ancestry. And then if you want to take it on a, more non-physical level, we get that programming through karma, whatever you want to call that, sort of come into the world with a set of conditioning around what we're going to be dealing with, whether that's karma or epigenetics or a mix of both. And then we get all our conditioning from our actual upbringing, right? So I, for one, came in with an inheritance of, we had some definite physical and emotional abuse and a lot of addiction, and then some poverty and food scarcity, and car going by, hold on. And then you have some sort of swinging towards some strict religious to sort of counterbalance all of that chaos from the poverty and the abuse and the substance stuff. So I came in with that. And then I started off my conditioning real quick because I had almost a near death at birth, was suffocating and had a seizure. So possibly some brain stuff there, if nothing else, some PTSD starting off on my first day here. And then within my first 3 years, I had 3 traumatic brain injuries with skull fractures and loss of consciousness and seizure activity. So I started off with some, conditioning around feeling safe, or rather not feeling safe. And then, being raised in a real strict religious environment, that sort of added to that conditioning. And then I had my experiences coming of age as a queer person, trying to navigate purity culture within Christianity. So a whole bunch of conditioning there. So you take all of that stuff, and whether you call it masking or conditioning, there's an opportunity to unravel all of that, right? And I think that's usually what people mean when they talk about awakening or self-realization or unmasking or deconditioning, is that you're coming back to sort of what is underneath on a soul level around being a human in this lifetime, that is not a reaction to the circumstances that were out of your control, but is sort of a reclamation of your sense of self without all of those things. And that is a process that a lot of people aspire to. A lot of people will say, even outside of spiritual circles, that they want to unmask or become more authentic, be more true to themselves. And yet the reconciliation process or the deconditioning process or the unmasking process is something that not a lot of people feel up for. And what can get kind of tricky is that, we sort of have a narrow set of options when it comes to these things. Some people go through a real religious experience to try to reach self-realization or deconditioning or create their own connection with their own sense of purpose and values. Less and less, I feel like, folks are able to actually receive that through religious circles, because the religion has... Car, 1 second. Religion has shifted away from self-realization and towards, relying on an external authority. So people also try through, traditional psychotherapy. There's a lot of good psychotherapy out there. You've got Jungian stuff, you've got internal family systems, you've got EMDR, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, all really strong. I jumped into dialectical behavioral therapy as a first place to go when I was trying to work through this stuff, and it was phenomenal for me, because I think dialectical behavioral therapy in particular, because it is part cognitive behavioral therapy and part Zen Buddhism, it has that like self-realization, radical acceptance, Zen aspect to it, mindfulness, that's incredibly helpful. But even with that, with all of the sort of psychotherapy options that are out there, the tricky piece is that a lot of people come into that work, well-intentioned, motivated, but their nervous systems crash out, because it's just too raw. It's too dangerous for them to really open up to the stuff that they've closed themselves off from for good reason. When we have trauma, or when we are facing self-abandonment in order to find belonging, or just basic, life survival needs, it's for good reason that the nervous system is like, yeah, we're not going to open up to stuff or start doing stuff that threatens our survival. And it may not feel like it threatens your survival right now, but hold on, another car. Pretty little water area. It may not feel like it threatens your survival right now, but even like, especially for neurodivergent people or highly sensitive people, any kind of like slight feedback when you're little that something is not okay, like what we all received, like through a timeout or a spanking, or a teacher, giving a consequence at school, that is associated when you're a young child with a survival threat, especially for neurodivergent or highly sensitive people. So, the studies show that neurodivergent and highly sensitive people they don't have the same threshold in their nervous system. So a small event, what would be a small event for a neurotypical person, or whatever word you like for that, a person without those heightened sensitivities, what would be small to them would be like big T trauma for someone who is neurodivergent or highly sensitive. So, let's see, we're getting some wind. It's just this little piece here. So all of that to say, you come into psychotherapy, you're all motivated, you want to look at your life, and it can become too overwhelming, and for good reason. We can sort of fall apart and not be able to do our day-to-day, and then we think it's not worth it, I can't do it. I started therapy a few times before I eventually ended up in DBT, and DBT has a higher level of support because it's a class and you have homework and you have regular check-ins and individual therapy with it, so it's more of a wraparound experience. But anyways, most people go into these things and then it's like, nope, I tried regular cognitive behavioral therapy once and I was like, forget it, too hard, too painful. And then I tried EMDR, I had a total meltdown, forget it, too painful, put it on the shelf. And that can happen to a lot of us. And then especially if we've had those experiences, we can really associate any kind of that kind of work with really having a horrible time, and so we can even avoid it. And without that opportunity to really have the nervous system capacity to go into the depth of those overwhelming things and take them apart and integrate them back, the process of unmasking and deconditioning and self-realization is basically you go back through every rule you ever learned and you decide, is this rule something I want to keep? Is it something I want to keep but change a little bit? Or is it something I want to let go of? And in that process, it can be painful because there are, we've kept that rule because it kept us safe. And so for those of us who want to have the experience of being more authentic and more unmasked, but don't have the capacity to do that work in psychotherapy, it can be really, really helpful to do nervous system work, which is basically where we learn about our nervous system, learn the daily lifestyle that supports a flexible, resilient nervous system. And then we take that flexible, resilient nervous system into our psychotherapy or our in-depth self-inquiry in order to go ahead and do that work. I think what a lot of people get confused about is they think the nervous system work is the thing that gets you feeling integrated and unmasked and authentic. It supports that, but it's the self-inquiry that begins in and follows the nervous system work. It's that deconditioning, really, challenging. Some people call it shadow work, whether it's parts work, whether it's EMDR, whether it's trauma-informed CBT, whether it's DBT, whatever it is, that it begins while you start your nervous system work, and then it continues after the nervous system work. So the nervous system work is a bridge. It's not a destination. And that is what I think can be really confusing to people, because they start to finish up their nervous system work, and the sign that you're finishing up your nervous system work and ready to transition to your real, deep deconditioning or unmasking work is that you start connecting with those deep, dark, scary parts of you. They start to feel comfortable coming out. It's like if someone had a little tightrope, okay, that was frayed in the middle, and they were at the other side of a chasm, and they were like, oh, come on, come across. Come walk across this with me. And the little scared part is like, no, that looks extremely dangerous and not stable at all. I'm not going to walk across that. So with nervous system work, we build it into like a decent bridge. And then the way your bridge has been built is that these overwhelming, scared parts of you, memories, feelings, what have you, start to walk across the bridge. They go, oh, you built a bridge for me. Now I feel more capable. I feel like you can hold me. And it's not that you can hold it and it's not scary or hard or sad. It's still scary and hard and sad. But this bridge can now hold the scary and hard and sad. And we then do the work. And I personally, I love doing, parts informed coaching alongside the nervous system work and, the work of Byron Katie. But when it comes to more complex trauma, I refer to trained trauma therapists. That's just what is most comfortable for me. And that is because I really want people, when they start to have these parts of them or memories start coming across the bridge, I want to get them the best support possible. And I don't have that level of training. And so as people finish up the nervous system work, they often I'm like having more emotions. I'm having more experiences of noticing, past memories or noticing things in my life that I really need to change. And I'm like, yes, that is the final slide on my presentation, is that we are building the bridge, the capacity with your nervous system so that these things can come forward and so that you can support them. And so, then you can transition into this deep work and do the deconditioning and the unmasking with someone who is specifically skilled in that, so that you can integrate with this, resilient nervous system, integrate all of these parts or traumas or memories or conditioning that you've wanted to integrate, so that you can do that sorting process of saying, okay, it turns out, let's say I was taught that, the most important thing for someone assigned female at birth is to get married and have children. Okay, and so I get to then go, okay, this is causing me actually a lot of stress because I'm not married and I don't want to be married. So if that's the case, then I'm gonna toss that rule for me. And that's why it becomes a completely individual process, because every single rule is going to be something that you determine for you. And, when you can actually open up to and face the pain that was caused by that rule, that's when you have the strength to be like, okay, this one's not for me. And a lot of people talk about how they have, limiting beliefs that cause them to self-sabotage. You're not self-sabotaging, you're self-protecting. But survival can become in the way of self-realization. And so that deep work, once we have, a connection with our nervous system and we know how to tell our therapist, like, hey, I've reached my point and I want to take a break and I want to do some nervous system exercises, and we're going to do all the beautiful things around our deep work, like making sure we're exercising every day and we're eating every day and we're sleeping really good and we're communicating our capacity to ourselves and others honestly, then we can hold and support ourselves through the deep work of connecting with all these past fears and traumas, all these limiting beliefs. Hold on. And bringing in, developing our understanding of what is our higher power, our higher wisdom, our higher purpose, making sure we have a strong connection to whatever anchors us into this reality. And so just to reiterate, the nervous system work is a bridge so that you can have the capacity to do the deep work of deconditioning and unmasking. And it gives you the resources to do so. And when you start to see those big feelings and traumatic memories, etc., coming across that bridge, you've done your work. You've built your bridge. It means they can come across, and now you can support them through your deep self-inquiry. So the nervous system work is not the end. It is a means towards that unmasking, deconditioning work. And you don't have to do that with a psychotherapist. A lot of people feel like it supports it in a really important way. But you can definitely do that through your own journaling, your own self-inquiry, in any way that's right for you. Okay, lots of love. I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful day.